This is the vocabulary PowerPoint for the final chapters of Bud Not Buddy. As we go through this video, please make sure to pause whenever you see a new word and add it to your personal dictionary so that you can use your personal dictionary to practice. Embouchure is a noun referring to music. There are two different definitions here. It can be the mouthpiece of a wood instrument or the adjustment of a player's mouth to such a mouthpiece. So in the book, it says, he said, called a recorder. Once developed a little wind and some tone in an embouchure, we'll move on to something a little more complicated. So it sounds like they are using the second definition there. Someone is talking about what Bud needs to practice. And so the adjustment and getting used to that mouthpiece would be what Bud would need to do to become a better musician. A prodigy is a noun. It is a young person who is unusually talented in some way. A prodigy is a genius, a whiz, a sensation. So the antonym of a prodigy would be an imbecile. In the book, Mr. Jimmy said, "Let me try it out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out on this cold November night. This night that will live in history. This night that for the first time on any stage anywhere, you will have listened to the smooth saxophonical musings of that prodigy of the reed, Mr. Sleepy LeBone." So Mr. Jimmy has given Bud a nickname and is saying that he expects that Bud very quickly will become a prodigy, meaning that he will be unusually talented in playing the reed. Scamp is a noun. It is a child who causes trouble, usually in a playful way. A synonym for a scamp would be a rascal, hooligan, prankster, or trickster. An antonym for a scamp would be an angel or a saint. In the book, it says he kind of whispered, so Miss Thomas couldn't hear. "You've got the rest of them fooled, but not me. There's something about you that I don't like. I'm going to find out what your game is, and you believe me, Scamp, you're going back where you belong." The he here is Herman E. Calloway, and he is talking to Bud, and he still seems to think that Bud is being a scamp, a rascal, a prankster, and does not really believe that that Herman is his dad, but instead Herman thinks that he is trying to cause trouble. Copacetic is an adjective that means fine, completely satisfactory, or okay. In the book, he said, "Good, because if you're going to be traveling with us, it just wouldn't look too copacetic for you to be carrying that ratty old bag." So one of the members of the band had gotten Bud a new bag and is saying that it would not have looked fine or copacetic for Bud to be carrying his sack that he had all of his possessions in before. Dinky is an adjective that means very small and not appealing. It's tiny, small, or insignificant. So in the book, whenever Bud says that they got in two cars to drive for an hour and a half north of Grand Rapids, he described the town they were going to as being dinky. So he envisioned the town as being small, tiny, insignificant. So he calls it dinky. He did not imagine it was going to be a huge, large, or exciting place that they were going. Insinuating is a verb. It means to say something, especially something bad or insulting, in an indirect way. So if you're insinuating something, you are indicating, suggesting, or implying. In the book, Mr. Jimmy said, "When she was living, Bud, God rest her soul, what'd your mama look like?" This was another strange question, but before I could answer, Miss Thomas said, "James, what are you insinuating?" So here, Mr. Jimmy is asking Bud some questions, trying to figure something out, but he never actually directly says what he is thinking. By his questions, Miss Thomas seems to understand that he is insinuating or implying something, but we do not know yet what that is. You can see this cat. If you actually went up to the cat and said, "Stop eating my goldfish," that would not be insinuating. But if you went, where are my goldfish, and kept eyeing your cat, then that would be insinuating that the cat ate goldfish. Merchandise is a noun. Merchandise are goods that are bought and sold. They are products, stuff, materials. In the book, the thug said, "I knew it. The boy's just too country. He ain't used to handling fine merchandise. We should have given it to him in a paper bag." So Bud in the book seems to have been given merchandise, or he seems to have been given some sort of stuff. It is then said that we should have given it to him in a paper bag. So I can imagine that whatever he's talking about, this merchandise, was something that holds other things like a paper bag would. But we'll have to read to see what that merchandise was that Bud was given. Reed can have two different definitions. The picture at the top of the screen shows a thin strip of wood, metal, or plastic inside some musical instruments, such as clarinets and oboes, that makes a sound when you blow over it. So that first definition matches that top picture of some wooden, metal, and plastic reeds. However, somebody can also say reeds and be referring to a musical instrument that has a reed. So the instruments at the bottom are also sometimes referred to as reeds. In the book, you can see that there are at least 3 different places in these last few chapters where it talks about a reed or reeds. The first text from the book says, "Mr. Jimmy said, 'Let me try it out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out on this cold November night. This night that will live in history. This night that for the first time on any stage ever, you have listened to the smooth, saxophonical musings of that prodigy of the reed, Mr. Sleepy LeBone.'" So there I can tell that he's using that second definition, the prodigy of the reed. I'm guessing he's just not really talented at making mouthpieces. He's probably very talented at playing an instrument. So that would be the second definition. The second text from the book says, "Steady Eddie could see I was stuck, so he lifted out of the suitcase and fished around in the bag for its mouthpiece, the neck and the reed holder. He took the reed for a minute, put the horn together, then played it." So there you can imagine that he's talking about the first definition of the reed. He held the reed and the neck of the instrument and put it together. So he seems to be talking about the actual reed that goes in the instrument. And the final text from the book says, "I wet the reed the same way I'd seen Steady Eddie do, then clamped it on the mouthpiece. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. So again, he wet the reed, so you can imagine he's talking about that first definition again, and that actual reed piece. Outhouses are small outdoor buildings that are used as a toilet. Remember that not too long ago, people did not have inside toilets. They had these outhouses, which were also called privies, outbuildings, or lavatories. In the book, Bud says, "Man, these inside the house outhouses were hard to get used to. I washed my hands with running hot water and closed the bathroom door kind of loud." So here, Bud is talking about how he thinks it is odd that there are inside the house outhouses. So you can imagine that this book is telling us that 1930s were around the time when people started to have toilets inside the house. Before this time, they were outhouses outside the house. Pulse is a noun. It is the regular movement of blood through your body that is caused by the beating of your heart, and that can be felt by touching certain parts of your body. So you can see at the bottom of the screen, 2 fingers being used to find a pulse on somebody's wrists, which is normally how nurses seem to take a pulse. In the top right-hand corner, you can also see 4 different places where you might be able to feel a pulse. I know for me, the bottom left-hand picture of the woman, her pulse being taken near her neck, is an easy place for me to feel my pulse. Some of the other ones, like near my forehead, it's harder for me to actually feel that pulse. So you might pause right now and see if you can find your own pulse in those areas. A synonym for a pulse is a vibration, beating, or rhythm. In the book it says, "But as sound asleep as you were, I'm really not all that surprised you didn't notice. I had to check your pulse to make sure you were still alive. So Bud is not waking up, but as long as you are alive, you have a pulse. So she knew that she could check his pulse in one of the ways that you see on the screen. But we can assume that she was probably exaggerating a little. She was just trying to tell Bud that he was in a deep sleep. Scales are a series of musical notes that go up or down in pitch. So you have probably talked about or heard about scales in music class. In the book, Steady Eddie said, "Don't thank me until you've been through a couple of hours of blowing scales. We'll see if you're still grateful then." So blowing scales, we can assume that instruments would have scales just like there are scales for singing. So Bud, through the rest of the vocabulary PowerPoint, we figured out that he may have a reed instrument now. So you can imagine blowing scales would be him practicing these scales, getting used to the notes that his instrument. Ornery is a noun. It means easily annoyed or angered, or difficult to deal with or control. Synonyms for ornery are mean, cranky, grouchy, grumpy, and nasty. Antonyms for ornery are agreeable, friendly, happy, kind, and nice. In the book, Miss Thomas said, "So if you can remember Bud, be patient with him. That ornery old man upstairs is very, very hurt right now, and I just can't say where he's going to land after this news gets through blowing him around." When Miss Thomas calls Hermione Calloway that ornery old man upstairs, she's saying that he is easily annoyed or angered and difficult to deal with or control. So it's not just saying that somebody is angry one time, but that as a character trait, this is common. Curtsy is a noun, and it is our final word for vocabulary for chapters 15 through 18 of Bed Not Betty. A curtsy is a formal way of greeting an important person, such as a king or queen, in which a woman shows respect by placing one foot slightly behind the other and bending her knees. Synonyms for curtsy are bow and kneel. In the book, it says Miss Thomas stood up and did one of those curtsy bows. So Bud is comparing a curtsy and a bow. These are not typically used in modern culture. Whenever you meet someone new, I don't know that I've ever seen anyone curtsy anymore. So you can see by the definition when it says it was common whenever people are around kings and queens, you can kind of infer that it's more of a thing of the past. And so curtsy is our final word.